Hello and welcome. Today we are jumping into our third topic, from abstract layouts to specifics. This is part 3 of a multiplayer level design direction series. Today we'll talk a lot about player option management and move to a more detailed layout, but without going all the way into things like cover placement. This video doesn't have an overarching message, rather it covers a number of high-value topics that needs to be kept in mind. Alright, it is time to get a bit more complex. If we just focus on building the main lanes, then our maps stay quite simple. Furthermore, if we only build them and no other supporting lanes, then the design becomes almost too obvious, and we want to avoid it ideally. The more your design has a subconscious impact, the better. It is a bit like the layout of a traditional English garden. Lots of thought went into the layout and flow, but you don't see the protractor of the park designer. Strict geometrical layouts are great to get the basics right, but it ends there. Imagine how unnatural the world would be if everything was designed on a strict grid, and that comes from a German. I mean, even New York City doesn't place all its cover objects in the same fashion as their streets. Not even in The Division. Also, please don't think that you have to translate these geometrical lines exactly in 3D. Without a doubt, you should change angles of the corners, adjust rotations, shift hallways, and so on when you build it for real. That means we're finally ready to start adding extra paths and to shape them to the environment. For example, we're talking about adding the thin alley between houses, the shortcuts through buildings, the conveniently placed door or window, the grid-like streets for the US or smally curvy routes in European cities, organic outdoor setups, and so on. But of course, we stay true to our fundamental composition. The origin of new paths rises from the need of options at the right places. In general, this should result in fewer longer paths where the player has no option to change routes. We've talked about it in previous videos, but as a reminder, it isn't very elegant level design to create long lanes without player options to change them. It is quite simple. The longer the lanes and the more players you build your map for, the more choices you need. Imagine the anxiety among 60-foot children with OCD in paint class, but they only have one ruler. Or that might be just me. Especially around areas of combat encounters, you need a good amount of get the fork out ways for the player. Imagine you are pinned down in a hallway and the only option you have left are wait to get shot or make a suicide run. To make things worse, you have the same situation every time you take that hallway. I bet you would enjoy the level design a lot more if you had a way out. However, additional paths should be created carefully. Sometimes you don't want a lot of choices. So for example, for the attackers to go against the enemy spawn point. Players will try it anyway, but there is no reason for you to support any such jerk moves. Sometimes it should be hard here and there or require a specific tactic like a long-range approach. So if a lane is designated by you to be a sniper section, then it doesn't need a lot of shotgun CQB tunnels, but instead a lot of cool sniper spots and ways to travel between them. Now, let's keep in mind that you know your level very well, at least I hope so. But the bigger problem is that the player does not. I might jump a bit ahead, but the player doesn't know all your detailed thoughts, incredibly sophisticated high-level concepts, and the sophisticated ways the map should be played. And even though it might seem obvious, I've seen many wannabe genius junior level designers crying during playtests simply because the playtesters don't play the map the way the level designer wants them to. But yeah, let's talk about playtests another time. It is a very interesting and fun, but huge topic. Alright, once again, traditionally around the objectives or sometimes center of the map, you want more options for the players. Those are the locations the players fight the most. Those are the dynamic hearts of your maps. And yes, it can be that the whole map has to be treated like that, even though that means you just made your life a lot harder. Having enough options doesn't just reduce frustration, but importantly, they reduce boredom and predictability. If you always know the main paths of your enemies and they're yours, then you can't really surprise each other anymore and the map quickly becomes, well, boring. A few basic rules in between. First, it is a simple rule of risk versus reward. A longer path should reward with some safety because you spend more time here. A shorter path can be more risky because it is obviously faster. Secondly, Now combine that with a path which has a high frequency of battle, once again needs more GTFO options, while a less frequent lane can live with less options. Third, avoid dead ends, period. Free pro tip. Start to play the map in your mind and get excited. If you can't get excited, you're doing something very wrong. And I mean it not like the cold-blooded, brilliant, analytical German you love, but from an emotional, human experience perspective. What cool stories or tactics can happen here? Do you have some cool section for bluffs, a fast and risky flank route? Maybe a stealth underground path to the back of the enemy objective? A small maze with some visceral and chaotic cat and mouse? Or even a super risky parkour stunt section? These are the paths which legends are made of. Emphasizing the strengths of your map and reducing risk in your layout is key if you don't just want to get lucky. Think about the good, the bad, and especially the ugly YouTube videos your map could create, and you should know what to do, or rather what to avoid. When we get more detailed, we should also start thinking about further game mode specifics. So for example, a team defending 2 bomb spots in Counter-Strike needs at least one exclusive path, if not more, to travel in between the spots. In team deathmatch maps, spawn points need quick ways out and routes to important spots like weapons, upgrades, sniper spots, general map control areas, armor, and so on. Distances to those special spots should roughly be similar from spawn point to spawn point, but more about distances and timing in later videos. Bottom line, learn and master the game mode specific layout requirements. I recommend to study all the classic maps of your game mode and make a checklist. This stuff might be a return engagement for Captain Obvious, but if common sense were actually a thing, I would have a lot less need to make such videos. So, just because we sketched so far in 2D, that doesn't mean we neglect the fact that most likely we work on a 3D game nowadays. A previous flanking route can be moved below the middle without sacrificing much of the length, since the players have to go up and down as well. Path and lane can overlap and so on. In general, anything which doesn't feel like a total boring pure 2D map in a 3D game is already a step in the right direction. Verticality in any form or shape can be a huge factor, but keep target platform controllers in mind. Looking, or rather aiming, up and down is still more comfortable with mouse and keyboard compared to a classic controller. Also, going completely horizontal with your layout is a bit trickier and won't get covered specifically here today. We are slowly coming to an end of today's video, but let's have a quick last chat about the balance of complexity. Let's look at 2 cases. In the first one, we have a complex staging area before the objective, one which is easy to control. To compensate for this, the layout directly around the objective should make it harder to attack. In the second case, a rather simple and predictable staging area should mean the objective is rather easy to attack. Approaches to the objectives can't be all easy or all difficult, but should provide a contrast to the difficulty of the objective space itself. And naturally, with multiple objectives in a map, ensure there is variety. Okay, what does it mean now? A team now has to think a bit more to execute their plan. In the first version, the approach is, we all have to be at the right spot to execute this difficult attack, but getting to those spots is not the problem. In the second version, it is, attacking should be pretty straightforward, but we have got to be on our toes getting into position. If both options exist in the map, what is the preferred tactic of the team? Can I predict the enemy team cause I know them, or are they one of those unpredictable ones? You see, there are already some good stories in the layout without getting fancy with expensive features. And why do we do all this? Because we want the player to feel clever, not lucky. If he feels clever, he feels good, cause it is satisfying when a plan works out. On the other hand, if you know that most likely you can only win or lose by luck, then you have a bitter taste in your mouth every time the map shows up on your loading screen. I hope this video was informative and entertaining. I look forward to the next video where we will continue with further multiplayer level design thoughts.